Good evening and welcome to Friday's ITV News Meridian.
The headlines as Storm Eunice hits the southeast.
My God!
Trees are down, houses damaged and very rough seas, and for one driver, a very close call.
Guess it was my lucky day.
Travel hit hard, ferries and flights delayed, motorways closed. The storm's now dying out. The clean-up begins.
Also this Friday evening, the conference to try to stop climate change. What's been achieved and what happens next?
And back with a bang, the Gravesend boxer who's using his Olympic disappointment to help him conquer the world. Good evening. Kent, Sussex and Essex took a battering today. Storm Eunice was predicted and the southeast was on guard. But in the face of the sheer ferocity of the gales and at one stage more than 70-mile-an-hour winds, there was little that could be done to stop damage to buildings, power cuts and travel disruption.
The storm has now left the east coast of Kent and headed out over the North Sea. But Eunice has left a trail of destruction and a massive clear-up operation. Delayed flights and ferries, traffic jams and insurance claims are likely to be in the millions.
We're live tonight with Tony Green in Folkestone, James Dunham at Gatwick and Holly Green in our newsroom. First, this report from Tony Green in Kent.
We were told not to travel unless it was absolutely essential, and this is why. A tree comes down on the London road in Maidstone, captured by the dashboard camera of the motorist it missed.
Guess it was my lucky day.
Staying at home wasn't safe for everyone. A tree crashed onto this house in Chatham, felled by Storm Eunice, leaving a trail of destruction that kept the emergency services busy all day.
If you do see things like trees that are down, if it's a life risk, absolutely, call 999 and ask for the fire service. If it's not a life risk, then contact the relevant authority, local authority.
In all honesty, I have no idea on the overall numbers of inquiries that have been coming in. I mean, the only one that we've had a statistic for is from Kent Police, that they've had over 5 times the normal 999 calls in one day.
The flooding would have been different, but it would have stretched us. We've been able to plan all week and be out on the beaches getting our defences ready for today. If we had to manage the rain at the same time, that would have been tougher.
There are 350 miles of coastline in Kent where the weather was at its worst. Some carried on working regardless, others didn't know what to do.
Surely you must have known that this storm was coming.
Well, yeah, when it was on the news and people started talking about it, but not understanding really how bad it's going to be. And also, I've been at the seaside for like 2 years, but a lot of it in lockdown, and we've not had any really severe weather, so this is the first time I'm experiencing it and running a business with it as well.
Some structures stayed up, others came down. The middle chimney of the power station on the Isle of Grain collapsed completely.
My God!
These flats in Repton Park in Ashford and this house in Whitstable, more casualties of the storm. Eunice may have arrived later and not stayed for long, but she certainly made her presence felt.
Well, let's cross to Tony Green above the M20 near Folkestone. Tony, what's it been like there for you?
Well, there's been a huge clear-up operation that's already begun, and there's also a catch-up operation, and that's exactly what this queuing traffic is behind me. This is a queue of HGV that goes on for miles and miles down the M20. This is all freight or empty lorries that are heading to the continent, and the only way of getting to France today was through the Channel Tunnel because DFDS, P&O and Irish Ferries all cancelled services. You saw those waves crashing against the harbour wall in Dover. At the end of my report, nobody wants to be in a boat in conditions like that.
But things are starting to calm down now, are they?
Yes, that's right. That's absolutely true. And so there's a lot of work being carried out to assess the damage that's been done today. But also we know that there's power lines that have come down, lots and lots of trees have come down. But we know that some of those trees that are still standing have weakened roots. They may come down in the next few days. We know that the weather isn't going to settle soon.
Tony Green, thank you very much for that update.
Well, in Sussex, the storm ripped the roofs off buildings and brought down trees onto roads and a primary school. The coast saw winds in excess of 70 miles per hour.
Electricity supplies to more than 100,000 homes across the southeast have also been affected. Restoring power may take some time, as Malcolm Shaw now reports.
If there was any doubt about the destructive power of Storm Eunice, here's the proof. The roof of a barn torn off at Hurstmont Zoo in Sussex, and at Camber Sands, this was all that was left of a holiday home after the storm ripped through. Along the Sussex coast, winds reached more than 70 miles per hour, huge waves pounding the harbour arm at Newhaven, ferries to Dieppe cancelled. At Rottingdean, the Undercliff Walk was closed amid fears of falling debris. Conditions had deteriorated quite dramatically in the last half hour. The wind has really picked up. It's quite hard to stand upright, and the rain is lashing me. It feels like time to get somewhere safer. A stone's throw from the seafront, the aptly named Sea Spray Cafe braved the elements.
We've still had quite a few customers in this morning, so yeah, they love it. They love it, yeah. And if they're willing to drive down here, then you've got to stay open.
Part of coastal living, so you can't combat nature. I live in Venetia, and we've had some pretty bad storms over the last few days. It feels like a bit of a breeze to me.
My house is having a lot of building work done, so I've got a lot of scaffolding. So I'm trying to stay out of the house because it's pretty bad.
Spectacular scenes at Brighton Marina, but a warning not to get too close.
The sea is so powerful, and the drag that it could have back on if you get caught in it, and it carries an awful lot of shingle and debris in it as well. That then causes flooding along the coast, and it is really quite phenomenal what we're actually seeing here at the moment compared to normal.
The storm hit power supplies to scores of homes, Hastings among the areas affected.
We've had a number of faults across the southeast. We've still currently got around about 113,000 customers who are off supply across Kent, Sussex and Surrey.
In Kingston near Lewes, a huge tree was uprooted, falling against the primary school, luckily closed for the half term. And another tree fell onto the pitch at Three Bridges Football Club near Crawley. While in Shoreham, the job of clearing up after Storm Eunice is already underway. Malcolm Shaw, ITV News.
Well, let's cross live now to James Dunham at Gatwick Airport. James, this is half term. People are returning from ski holidays. This should have been a busy day, but I guess it didn't quite happen as planned.
You can say that again, Luke. 99-mile-per-hour winds at one point recorded on the runway here at Gatwick. 51 flight cancellations, many more delayed. And they've had a double whammy of disruption here today, really. At one point, Gatwick Airport Station had to close because of power problems. And it's with the trains where our roundup of the travel disruption in the southeast begins.
A greenhouse, shed, dozens of fallen trees, including here on the line in Horsham, while branches became lodged under this train on the Tunbridge to Sevenoaks route.
We hit a tree about 2 or 3 minutes outside Hildenborough. It's all tangled up in the power connectors, and so they've had to send people out with chainsaws. It is 10:15 now, and we've been here a little over an hour.
Well, it's just gone 11 o'clock. The winds are starting to pick up now, and Network Rail have closed several train lines in the southeast between Ashford and Eastbourne, Folkestone and Ramsgate, and between Hastings and here at Tunbridge.
By lunchtime, the prospect of storm damage led to Southeastern cancelling all of its services in Kent and East Sussex, while Thameslink and Southern were able to run a limited number of trains on the Brighton main line, although the message was stay at home.
So like the rest of the country, we first became aware that this was going to be an issue earlier in the week, and the news has only got worse as the week's gone on. So we've lined up extra teams across the county and across the whole of the southeast, in fact, with chainsaws, etc., ready to go at a moment's notice. There's a lot of overtime going around today.
In Dover, cross-channel ferry services were completely suspended because of the rough conditions. Drivers heading towards the Dartford crossing were redirected through the tunnels with the QE2 bridge closed, and the bridge to and from Sheppey was also shut. At Gatwick, the arrivals board made for grim reading. The 10:55 from Barcelona at the top, for example, expected at 4:24. And for those trying to get away, a long wait to take off.
The flight couldn't land, it tried to land twice, and it's now been diverted to Copenhagen. So we've now been rebooked to fly to Sweden tonight at 8:30. Hopefully we've got a hotel in Sweden, in Stockholm, and then we're flying early tomorrow morning to Helsinki. So we will get to Helsinki, but yeah, we'll see.
It's also been quite frustrating sitting here by the window. I've actually seen several flights take off and land. But yeah, it's been that fun.
We've got chocolate bars, drinks from the shops here, so this will keep us going until we can check in and hopefully go to the departure lounge.
You won't be going hungry?
No, we'll try not to.
As expected, travel disruption has been widespread. The warnings were there, with Storm Eunice bringing many a bumpy landing.
And it will be a bumpy few hours and weekend ahead for plane services, flight crew all out of place, meaning there will be further disruption here at Gatwick. On the ferries in the last few moments, P&O has resumed services between Dover and Calais, while DFDS is also warning of delays. Network Rail say that they'll be bringing in empty trains to run along routes to make sure they are clear of debris over the next few hours, but we do know that the Maidstone East line will not reopen for the rest of today. Meanwhile, Southern and Thameslink say anyone who couldn't use their tickets today can use them over the weekend and on Monday, but it's worth pointing out that there will be a 9-day closure on the Brighton main line starting tomorrow, meaning buses between Brighton and Three Bridges, Luke.
James Dunham live at Gatwick tonight, thank you.
Well, Holly is in our newsroom at the Media Wall. Holly, we all knew it was coming. Was it as bad as you expected?
It certainly was, yes. We've been worried about Storm Eunice for days. It always looked like it had the potential to be an exceptional storm. Let's just remind ourselves about the plethora of warnings we had in force across the country today. In the north, snow warnings. In the south, it was all about wind. And here in the southeast, we had a red warning in force. That's the highest level of warning. And the Met Office told us to prepare for gusts of 60 to 80 miles an hour. And Storm Eunice certainly proved itself capable of delivering these winds. Now, the worst of the weather is over, but unfortunately, as we head through this weekend, we are still expecting some very strong winds. For tomorrow, for example, we have got a yellow warning of wind in force. I will, of course, have all the details a little later.
Yes, more from Holly later in the programme. You're watching ITV News Meridian here in the southeast. Coming up, 100 days on from COP26. So what's been achieved by the Climate Change Conference?
And the Kent boxer who's using his Olympic disappointment to help him conquer the world.
And for more on all of our stories, go to itv.com/Meridian. You can call us on 0808 1010 095. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter.
Now, there were big promises from both our government and governments around the world last year when international delegates gathered for COP26 in Glasgow. This weekend will mark 100 days since the end of that conference, but so far there has been no other significant announcements on climate policy.
Well, last November, James Webster was one of our team reporting from the conference in Glasgow. He's been back there today, and earlier I asked him what has been happening since the event ended.
Well, it is around about 3 months since the buildings behind me here were filled with world leaders trying to find a solution to the problem of climate change. As you walked around there, you could hear how many different accents, how many different languages were being spoken, a real indication of how many people were invested in this conference. And there were delegates here too from our region and people watching from our region from afar, really keen to understand how the decisions made here would directly affect people in our region going forward. Among them was Andrew Durling, who's a campaigner from Eastbourne, who questions actually the wisdom of some of the decisions which have been made since COP26.
Carbon emissions are still far too high, and the world is still too dependent on fossil fuels. We simply need to get off fossil fuels as soon as possible. And of course, unfortunately, since COP26, the UK government has given permission for 6 new oil and gas fields in the North Sea, which is completely balmy, really. It's just not on.
So some concern there, and there has been a little bit of a feeling that in the time since COP26 it has gone a bit quiet. We haven't heard much about climate. So what was it all for? Well, the UK is still the president of COP until this autumn and is committed to building on the deal that was done here. It was 2 weeks of difficult negotiations. The talks ran over, but a deal was done.
I also understand the deep disappointment. But I think, as you have noted, it's also vital that we protect this package.
Some, but not all countries agreed to phase out coal power. Deforestation will be stopped and in some cases reversed. More new vehicles will be zero emission. But conservationists say the conference missed other issues like international aviation and the impact of our food. And here they've criticised our government for not halting controversial plans for a new coal mine in Cumbria and the expansion of Bristol Airport. The minister in charge of COP26 is currently touring Asia, seeking further progress. Countries were told to go away and come back with better targets. Are they telling you that they intend to do that?
Well, this is precisely part of what we're doing right now during this year. At this stage, these are words on a page. There are commitments that have been made by countries, some of which have to be delivered by the end of this year, others that are to be delivered in years forward. That is what this year is all about, pushing forward on delivery, ensuring that the commitments that have been made are turned into real action.
The Independent Climate Change Committee, which scrutinises the government's policies, published its review of COP26 in December. It feels the UK still hasn't put enough changes in place to deliver on its net zero targets at a time it should be leading by example. When will we see more policies which will achieve those targets?
In terms of policies, we put forward before COP a net zero strategy where we set out how we were going to get to net zero by 2050, which is enshrined in law. And as part of that, it was really important to also recognise that, of course, this is about cutting emissions. This is about having a healthier environment for everyone in the UK and across the world. But it's also about growing the economy.
What more do you need to be doing to engage with the public on this?
Yes, I mean, look, I think the public is on board. But of course, what we need to be doing is explaining perhaps even further the benefits of going to net zero. And what we need to do as a government is to demonstrate that actually net zero is very good news for the environment, it's good news for the future, but it's also good news for the economy. At the end of the day, this is about driving green growth.
And for climate change campaigners, ensuring the momentum of Glasgow isn't lost is vital.
People want to switch to electric vehicles, they want to have different forms of sustainable transport, they want to install double glazing and insulation and heat pumps. The problem is that there's just not the incentives or the money there to allow people to do so. So I think that's what people are expecting from the government now.
When thousands of campaigners travelled to COP26, they didn't just want targets, they wanted the changes to achieve those targets. On its own, reaching a deal was not enough.
So, James, we've seen you speaking to Alok Sharma there. What's your assessment? Has there been further progress in the last 100 days, do you think?
There have been no significant policy announcements domestically on the environment since then, and that really isn't going to cut it with the independent experts, because they think that the UK right now needs to be leading by example while it is the president of COP. They say that if everything that was promised here at COP26 is achieved, it's still not enough to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees, which is what scientists agree needs to happen. And those experts also say that domestically, the UK still hasn't demonstrated how it will reach its targets in 2030 or 2050. So in a lot of ways, the UK is still like many of the countries that Alok Sharma is travelling to, big on ambition, but not so big on how to deliver those ambitions. There is still 8 months in which the UK holds the presidency of COP, and Alok Sharma tells me he is keen that further progress is made in that time.
OK, James Webster in Glasgow, thank you.
And the ITV Evening News continues with the national and international news at 6:30 with more details. Here's Mary Nightingale.
Storm Eunice smashes into the UK, leaving thousands without power. There have been record-breaking high winds in parts of southern England, and a major incident has been declared in London. In Wales, both 7 bridges are shut for the first time. And in Scotland and northern England, Eunice brings freezing temperatures and snow. We will have all the very latest at 6:30.
Time now for the sport and Andrew Pate. And Andrew, you have news of a boxer who's ready to bounce back after the Olympics.
Yeah, it was a bruising time in Tokyo, but a former lorry driver from Gravesend is ready to make his professional debut at the O2 Arena. That's just 5 years after he considered quitting boxing for good. And Team GB cruiserweight Chevon Clark says he's ready to prove his doubters wrong after losing out at the Olympics. Joe Caution has been to meet him and look back at the journey so far.
Small businesses and local teams, the heart of our communities. eBay sponsors ITV Regional Sport Reports.
We know that it's just a matter of time before he makes it to the top.
Chev has everything when it comes to the boxing.
Kent might have a very good cruiserweight coming their way.
You can't say they didn't warn us, but Chevon Clark has had plenty to overcome in his journey to becoming professional. At aged 8, he fell off a ladder and was impaled on a metal spike. Then, aged 18, his appendix burst, taking the never say die spirit that boxers thrive on quite literally.
So you gave us some predictions last time, Chev. You looked down the camera and told us that Kent will have a new cruiserweight, so I'm going to get you to do the same again. What's next?
I mean, I ain't undisputed champion yet, so we're working on it. But it's good, the process has started, and yeah, it's going to be exciting. Make sure you guys come out and watch us.
The process for anyone turning pro typically starts much younger. But for Chevon, he's now in what's considered a boxer's prime at age 31. He has a wealth of experience as an amateur that led to him competing on the world stage as an Olympian, something his new coaches believe will be key.
Been schooled well from a brilliant amateur club. Gravisham's really bring him up well. Then to go on to GB, so my job's just polishing the diamond, really. I believe he can be a world champion. You know, obviously I would like to go through the British route, European, then world, but you got to be in it for a world title. It's not worth being in it just to sort of compete. You got to be in it to make a name, and I believe he will.
Obviously, you want to look classy. I do want to look classy. I want to entertain people, but you know, I want to come out of the game with my faculties. So I need to keep my thinking head on and not just be a out and out brawler, let's say.
Fighting smarter, the game plan then. And it's a far cry from the Chevon 5 years ago who fell out of love with boxing and became a lorry driver. This debut marks the start of a new journey. Destination, world champion. Joe Caution, ITV News.
Now for a team that's bouncing back, because everything looked lost for Gillingham until Neil Harris became manager at the start of the month. The Gills were 10 points from safety at that stage, but Harris has cut that gap in half with 2 wins and a draw in his 4 matches. And he hopes the players and the supporters will be on top form for tomorrow's visit of Plymouth.
You know, it's up to us as a group of players and staff and the fans to make it difficult for the away team and not a nice experience coming here. And the first couple of games against Crewe and Cambridge, I've certainly felt that chemistry between the terraces and the pitch.
All our games kick off at 3 o'clock tomorrow, weather permitting. Brighton hoping to avoid an upset against bottom of the table Burnley in the Premier League, while Crawley are looking to continue their great form, away form at Salford. Best of luck to all our teams.
Andrew, thank you very much for that. Let's cross back to Holly now at the Media Wall. Holly, it's been quite a day, hasn't it? But why was Eunice such an exceptional storm?
Well, do you know, it's basically all down to the jet stream, and we can take a look at it now. Here, the pink colours indicating winds over 200 miles an hour, exceptionally strong, very high in the atmosphere, around 30,000 feet. But you can think of the jet stream a bit like a hoover, sucking up air from lower in the atmosphere and causing Storm Eunice to undergo a process known as explosive cyclogenesis, turning it into an extremely powerful storm. And if we pop on the isobars and the weather fronts, you can see that we started the day with some rain, and then we had a little slice of sunshine. That may have felt misleading because that was the point that we started to see the strongest of the winds developing around the southern side of this low.
Holly, the strongest winds anywhere in the country were in the south, weren't they?
They were just a little outside our region. It was the Needles at the Isle of Wight. We've got some footage now. We can take a look at just how rough it was. And amazingly, not just was it the strongest gust in the country, it was actually the strongest gust ever recorded in England. It is an exceptionally windy site, but nonetheless, it gives you a sense of the power of this storm. So that was the highest gust in the country. We can take a look at some of the other gusts recorded across the region. So even inland, we were seeing some exceptionally strong gusts. So Charlwood there in Surrey, 78 miles an hour, Manston 77, Langdon Bay there 77 as well. So you can see that it really was a very powerful storm. Lots of people saying to me, how does this compare to recent previous storms? Well, there have obviously been comparable ones. The Burnsday storm, possibly more severe back in 1990. Of course, we had the Great Storm of 87. That brought a gust of 115 miles an hour. Yes, not as high as the Needles, but it was a much less exposed site. And I think it's fair to say that it wasn't as bad as that storm, but nonetheless, we have seen some pretty exceptional weather for today.
It has been quite a day, hasn't it? Thanks, Holly. Well, more strong winds over the weekend, I think. Let's get all the details now. With the forecast, here's Holly.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
Well, certainly some exceptional weather today thanks to Storm Eunice. We have still got the amber warning valid until 9 o'clock, although we have now lost the worst of the winds. Unfortunately, though, we are expecting some further strong winds into this weekend. Not anything like as strong as today, but nonetheless, we have got a yellow warning in force for tomorrow. We could see gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour inland and 60 miles an hour for coastal areas. And of course, unfortunately, that could hamper any clean-up efforts. So this was Storm Eunice. That's been clearing its way eastwards. This is the feature, though, for tomorrow. So it might be a decent start to the day, but come the afternoon, outbreaks of rain work in, and they're accompanied by these very strong winds. And then for Sunday, another feature heads our way. This could well bring some patchy rain through the day, maybe something a bit organised later, and some strong winds, I think potentially gales especially later on. So out there this evening, well, turning increasingly quiet. Those winds continue to ease lighter. And actually, into tonight, with starry skies overhead, it turns quite chilly. So we could see a touch of ground frost in places as values drop down to low single digits. So we start tomorrow morning on quite a bright note. Unfortunately, it doesn't last. As we head into the afternoon, thickening cloud, outbreaks of rain spill in, and once again, these winds really whip up. So we have got this warning in force with the risk of gusts in exposure getting up to around 60 miles an hour. Obviously, this is a lot less than we've seen today, but nonetheless, it could just hamper any clean-up efforts. It could obviously add to the impacts that we've seen today. Our high tide times Dover there, midnight 33, and again at 12:43 into the afternoon. And then unfortunately on Sunday, we do continue to see the risk of gales. Do take care.
Valent sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
And in just a moment, the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and more on the Storm Eunice. And we've just heard that a motorist from Alton in Hampshire has died after a tree fell on the vehicle.
There'll be more on that story as it develops on our website and in our late news.
From all of us here, have a very safe weekend. Good night.
Bye-bye for now.